Awesome. All right. Welcome to Kowalski Analysis.
Thank you for having me, my friend. Appreciate being here.
Yeah, my guest today is Stefanos Sifandos. Did I pronounce that right?
Yeah, not too bad. Pretty close.
Sifandos?
Yeah, that's better.
I heard you say it, and I was like, tried
It's
to
a tough
remember.
one, man. It's a
Yeah,
tough one.
I'll just call you Stef for short.
Yeah, that's what my friends call me, so it's all good.
Awesome, man. So let me tell everybody a little bit about you here. I want to read everybody your bio. So Stefanos is a trained educator and relationships expert. With a background in behavioral science, he is passionate about leading people closer to their highest potential and each other. Stefanos's philosophy merges the best of Eastern and Western methodologies to promote spiritual balance and empower people in life and love. From trauma release to navigating the murky waters of modern masculinity to helping women understand the men in their lives, he helps people escape negative patterns and cultivate a positive sense of self. Stefanos has worked with thousands of men and women from all walks of life. Special forces soldiers, Olympic gold medalists, elite fighters, and everyday people have relied on him to restructure and reframe their relationships with themselves and their loved ones. Again, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. So how does one become a relations alchemist?
I don't know if there's any formal pathway for it of education in any capacity. I just, I love alchemical processes, transferring or transmuting or taking something and turning it into something else. And really, when I look at relationships, and not only for others, primarily for myself, man, like this is where this process all started for me, was looking at my own life, looking at how I show up in the world and type of human being that I am. And really, in the simplest form, is taking us from an undesirable state of being into a desirable state of being long term. So I'm not about spiritual bypassing or emotionally bypassing. I'm not about not feeling our stuff. I'm not about pretending everything's okay or numbing out. So it's like, oh, I'm uncomfortable. Let me get uncomfortable real quickly. I'm talking about the perpetual patterns. That's what I'm talking about. That we are conditioned by, that keep bringing us the same experiences, but with a different haircut or a different face and a different name. And it's about shifting that and going deep into the self and actually feeling our feelings and really creating a life for us, for ourselves, that we really appreciate and we are really connected to.
Yeah. How old are you?
I'm 38.
38. Okay. Yes, I was looking at a little bit. I'd love to know your background because I know you talked about overcoming addiction and infidelity and some childhood trauma stuff, and just would love to hear your journey of how you got to this place. When did it all happen? What was your like aha moment that you know, all that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've had various aha moments in my life, but probably the most impactful aha moment and catalyst for my own evolution, like deeper, more profound evolution, really happened probably about 6 years ago. And again, I've been very lucky that whilst I had a pretty rough childhood, and I feel most people do, not everyone, but most people do. And there's reasons for that. We're a byproduct of a particular culture. And so I experienced abuse, physical, emotional abuse in my household, a lot of volatility, a lot of fear, a lot of fighting, a lot of violence. And because of that, I developed patterns of hiding, and then patterns of shame, and then patterns of living in shadows, not being able to be myself, and then really being aggressive and angry and having rage in me, and uncontrollable rage, not knowing what to do with that, and then being violent myself, just doing stuff that we're told by mainstream culture is what men do, drink a lot of booze and get into fights, and pornography and prostitution, and it's okay to be unfaithful, and what someone doesn't know doesn't hurt them. And, and whilst there are competing values to that, I chose to go down that path because it was convenient, because it took me away from dealing with my pain and my repressed wounding and I mean, I really want to say the anger that I had towards my parents, the pain, the disconnection, that was bubbling all underneath the surface. And so 6 years ago, I was in a relationship, and she discovered that I was unfaithful in that relationship, and just witnessing her and the pain that I had, my actions had caused her, the way I was behaving in that relationship, it was just, I just couldn't understand it. I couldn't understand, why was I being that way if I really cared for someone? Did I really care for them? Was I narcissistic? What was going on in my life? What was I experiencing? And all of this shame just bubbled to the surface very, very quickly. And if you've ever dealt with shame, particularly with men, it's very paralyzing. And most men they'll do something called engaging a secondary emotion, because feeling shame and fear and sadness is often A, too overwhelming for men, and B, it's overwhelming because it's so foreign. And so we engage a secondary emotion that we layer over that shame, that fear, that sadness, that depression, anger, because anger is a more easily accessible emotion for men culturally, but also biophysically to some extent. And so that was the first time in my life that I didn't go to anger. Like I really didn't go, like I would go there, but I would pull back, and I actually just started feeling the sadness and the shame. And man, it was overwhelming. It was, I went through spurts of feeling suicidal. I obviously sought help, a great deal of help. I spent a lot of time on my own, by myself in solitude, dealing with these very big feelings.
Yeah.
Understanding who I was, my identity, what I was being, where all this stuff was coming from, the way I was acting in the world, the way I was treating myself and treating others. So I started really just making massive shifts in my life, slowly over time. But because I immersed myself in it, it was really a fast-tracked experience. So I'm talking about, like, I gave up my businesses, I stopped working. The only thing I maintained was contact with certain people and my exercise, my training, my physical movement. That's something that I committed to every day. And that was tough. But it was so ingrained and entrenched in me, being an athlete, that I just managed to do that. And that really that was part of what kept me going. But I was in personal development. I was in my own growth, 10, 12, 15, 16, 18 hours a day. I'd do hours and hours of meditation. I would seek counseling. I was working with shamans and spiritual healers. I would spend massive amounts of time in solitude and on my own. I was being in nature. I'd go for very long walks and just be by myself and just emote and be. And I just started honoring myself in a very different way, and started going through a process of forgiveness, which, in order to forgive, we have to feel. And in order to feel, we have to move through processes of freedom, and what freedom really looks like. I started defining that for myself. I mean, that's the short of it, man. I mean, there's obviously a lot more than that, but
No, I'm interested in unpacking it a little bit. So like as I was listening to you, so I've always been a cheater. I mean, I've had long periods of abstinence when I became a Christian, but I've never really dated as a believer. So when I was, when I had girlfriends, I was either not a Christian or I was a backslidden at the time. And, for the most part, I've pretty much always been unfaithful,
yeah.
And I attribute a lot of it to, I would have sex quickly and I would find myself attached to what I believe were the wrong women, because I wasn't evaluating from any set of criteria besides, am I physically attracted to this girl early on? And then we would have sex numerous times, and then we would be in something complicated. But I didn't really want to go down that path. What I was thinking about is, like, I remember my first girlfriend. I was with her and I was unfaithful, and I wanted to be faithful. I loved her. I wasn't in love with her. I loved her. I cared for her. And I remember, like, if I could have flipped the switch and made myself be able to be faithful to her, I would have. I desperately wanted that, but I could not force myself to do it. And, like, I mean, I remember thinking so much to myself, like, God, if I could only take a pill that would lower my testosterone, I would take it. Like, that's what I thought the problem was. And I think there's a lot of men that deal with infidelity out there. Like
Yeah.
there's just this belief, like, this is what men do or whatever. And then it wrecks their lives,
Yeah, it destroys their soul, man. I mean, I hear you what you're saying. I remember times every time I'd be in a relationship and I'd think, wow, I really care for this woman, and there's a deep attraction. Well, this is it. I'm not going to be unfaithful. There's no way I'm cheating. And then the next moment I'm at a massage parlor, or I'm visiting a prostitute, or I'm at a bar. And
yeah. And you think a lot of that is from, like, childhood stuff though, huh?
well, I don't think I know.
Yeah.
Well, I know within myself, I won't speak for other people, but I'm pretty confident after working with thousands and thousands of people and doing this for many years.
Yeah.
I'm pretty confident. I know where most people's drives to be dishonest and live in shadows comes from.
Mm. Yeah, I didn't even know about the shadow self until I did Landmark Forum. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, but they talk a
Very,
lot. Yeah.
yeah.
And you know, from the time I was 15 years old, I wanted to be a male stripper. I was, I wanted to be the guy that was good with girls, eventually became really promiscuous. And I would have attributed all that to just being, horny or girl crazy or whatever. Not like, where did that's when I started to question is when I did Landmark. I'm like, where did that come from? Like, why did I want to be a stripper when I was 15 years old? Like, that's not normal. Like, there was something there that whether I was trying to prove something or maybe I was trying to, mask some pain, but
Have you unpacked that?
not completely. No. I mean, a little bit, I'm seeing a therapist now. I've been working with life coaches for years. We were poor, moved around a lot. Dad was never really in the same state. Probably some of that, I wanted to fit in. I wanted to be cool.
We all have a different definition of what it means to be cool, and if there's a father wounding there or a parental wounding there around, seeking approval and validation and even attention, the fact that your father wasn't around. As young boys, we want someone that we can relate to, that we can bounce ideas off, that's familiar physically to us and similar to us. It's a very important part of our coming into manhood, right? And if we don't have that, we'll develop high risk behaviors to get the attention of our fathers. And, it's pretty cool to be a male stripper and get all the girls, right? And so we start looking at that and we're thinking, oh, maybe dad will approve of that. Maybe he'll like that. Maybe he'll see me in a different way. Maybe he'll think I'm cool. And sometimes, as kids, we develop ideas of, I wonder why dad's not around. Maybe it's because of me. Maybe it's because of the way I'm being. So if I'm cool enough or if I'm popular enough, then maybe he'll think I'm good enough to be in his life and he'll want me in his life. And these are unconscious drivers, right? But this is the way the psyche interacts with its environment and with ourselves. And so I'd say it's probably a little bit of that. I'd say it's probably a little bit about maybe what you were exposed to, maybe an over-sexualized environment to some extent, maybe
100%.
not. But I'd say that's probably what it is, And so that, and you start putting all these ingredients in a pot and you then start to form an idea of, okay, what does it mean to be popular? What does it mean to be likable? Because we all have fundamental needs. We want to be seen. We want to be appreciated. We want to be respected. We want to be heard. We want to be understood. We want to be accepted. So we all have these fundamental needs, and how we achieve those needs, it varies with everyone based on their own personal intra and interpersonal experiences. And so what we'll often do is we'll start moving in the shadows because it's easier to make a mistake there or to do something that's not going to be appreciated or, approved of by others because no one's going to see it. And that's sort of like our training ground. But what happens is we get addicted to the shadow behavior. It becomes the norm for us. Infidelity becomes the norm. It's very easily justified. Well, I've already done it once. What's the difference if I do it again? Well, like, what's the difference, And it's good. She doesn't know and everything's okay. I'll just keep going. So, that goes for any shadow behavior. And it's very, very easy to have a magnetic compulsion towards that because it's serving us in some capacity, but more importantly, it's protecting us. It's protecting us from feeling something that's very painful.
Yeah. So yeah, I don't even think a lot of people are aware that this is going on. I think that a lot of people live in ignorance and they think that they're just, they're a cheater or, this is the way men are, like you said. So who's your typical client? Is it men or is it women?
Both, actually, man. Both. Yeah. It's like women really want to know and understand men and be able to be with men in a particular way whilst honoring themselves. And men come to me for various reasons, to be honest with you, man. Yeah.
So what would you tell somebody? Like, what is the first step if somebody's starting to question these things? Would it be to go see someone like you, or what is the first step of the work?
Well, that's a great question. So and often people ask this about, okay, so what do I do? So there's some fundamental tenets that we must live by as human beings, right? And so first is that we're relational beings. We're social beings. We can't do life on our own. It just doesn't work like that. Think about the relationship you have with nature. It gives us food. It gives us oxygen. It gives us an ability to live. There's a relationship there, right? Think about growing. Like if we didn't have parents or caregivers, we wouldn't survive. Or we need people so we're interdependent on people, is it right? Not codependent, that's unhealthy, that's extreme, but we're interdependent on each other. The second part is that we also, we thrive in solitude as well. And we need to be self-reliant beings. And so it's like a paradox there. It's about finding the balance. And so what I say to people is don't do it on your own. Seek some support, whether it's a men's group, whether it's a counselor, a psychologist, a coach, shaman, a spiritual healer, a friend, a sister circle, whatever it is that you're doing. Seek some help to get some feedback, because we often can't see the forest through the trees. We can't see beyond our own perspectives. Or we'd like to, we'd like to. It doesn't always work like that. So we can get some honest feedback from people that we trust and respect. We're going to be careful we don't go back to old peer groups that just reinforce old behaviors. That happened to me a great deal. And these people in my life were amazing people. They'd been with me through thick and thin. They were also reinforcing values that I didn't align with anymore. And so I had to make a choice about, what does this look like? Do we change it together? Do we grow together? Do we grow apart together? What does that look like? So you've got to be discerning. We've got to think for ourselves. We live in a world, man, where we don't think for ourselves. We're told what to think. We're told what to eat. We're told what to watch. We're told what to do. We're told where to go. We have to get some sovereignty back, some individuation back into who we are. It's really important. So thinking for yourself, that's that element of self-reliance, being discerning. You have all the answers within you. If you spend a few minutes with yourself, you may not get everything, but you'll get so much further than where you would have if you just keep going through life blindly. And so I just recommend simultaneously spend 5 minutes at the end of every day thinking about how your day was. Did you appreciate yourself? Could you have behaved differently? The conversation that you had with your partner, did it go the way you wanted it to go? How were you emoting that day? And also, in addition to that, seek support, formal support. What I mean by structured support. So every week you're connecting with someone, or you have a group, or you check in with your friends on a daily basis, whatever it may be. Seek support and don't do it alone.
So somebody that's basically where you want to be. Maybe they've had a faithful, a guy that's been in a faithful relationship for the last 20 years. Talk to somebody like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. So, we're reading a book about the Enneagram. Do you know about the Enneagram?
Yeah, actually, it was interesting you mentioned that. My wife just mentioned it to me yesterday.
Yeah, we're actually reading that now.
Talking about it.
And there's some parts about the shadow self, or at least there's, components of the things that I've learned in Landmark about that, where you'll have these coping mechanisms that maybe you developed as a child that you retreat to protect yourself. And maybe they're not even working. A lot of people just think, oh, it's part of my personality. Like you talked about anger, and that could be something from when you were 30, 40 years ago that you're using, that you used as a child that you're still trying to use, that's not serving you well. So I was wondering if you did any work in that with the Enneagram.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, my primary is a type 2, and then 8 and 7 are very, very close as well. So I'm a 2, 8, and 7.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'm an 8.
Yeah.
An 8 with a 7 wing. So we're fairly close. I think when you're in a healthy 8, they say you go into a 2. Is that right? I don't know.
I believe so, by memory. Yeah, I'm not by no means am I an expert in the Enneagram. I've taken it, I've looked over it.
Sure.
It's been a while. It's been a couple of years now. Happy to go over it again though, because it's actually, it's quite interesting. I find human design quite interesting as well.
Yeah. So you said, I was looking at some of your videos online, and you do a lot of, personal development work. What's your routine look like now?
Like my own personal routine for myself.
Do you have like a morning routine that you follow?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And, sometimes I taper off, or I shift things around, like supplements, like I'll cycle on and off with supplements. Generally my routine, a good morning routine is defined by a good evening routine, which I've been a little bit lax lately. Actually, my evening routine has made my morning routine a little harder, but generally, evening routine, try and be asleep between sort of 10 and 11 at the latest, but 10 and 10:30, sort of somewhere there. Try and wake up just pretty naturally. Anywhere between sort of 6 and 7, I'll get up. I'm going to try and get up a little earlier. I'm going to start getting up a little earlier because I enjoy getting up earlier. It feels good. I was just on a vision quest a couple of weeks ago, and I was in the wilderness, in altitude, high up on desert, by myself, basically in solitude. 5 days, no food, just sleeping bag, nothing else, just by myself. It was a vision quest.
Mm-hmm.
And man, you know, the sun set, I'd go to sleep. The sun got up, I woke up, naturally, it was beautiful. Like that, it's instant biorhythm, you know, instant resonance, the body and nature. So to get in nature a little more as well. But so that's my evening routine. I'll do some reading in the evening. Wake up, I'll go to the bathroom. So I'm pretty regular, so I love that. I'll have my water with lemon. I will, you know, general hygiene. I'll just sit, then I'll go sit in stillness, do some breath work, do some reading, and then I'll move my body. So training, exercise. So my you know, my work, quote unquote, work day won't start until, you know, sometimes it starts earlier, but it won't start until generally sort of 10:30 to 11:30, you know, somewhere there. That's my morning routines. Yeah. Just stillness and breath is a big part of that.
Yeah, I saw a video. I didn't, or at least one of the topics I think that your assistant sent over was do this for 3 hours a day to change your life, or maybe it was I did this for 3 hours a day. What was it? Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, something about it was something to do with your routine with 3 hours a day. I don't remember exactly what it said, but maybe it was, I thought it was the morning routine.
Oh, it could have been. I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but I do remember, you know, a period of my life where, you know, I mentioned earlier that I was walking a lot, right? And I would just walk and walk and walk, man. I'd get into this trance, and I would just, it was unbelievable. And I was in a pretty painful place in my life as well. So I was processing a lot, but I processed a lot of emotions and thoughts and ideas of who I was and who I was being just through walking. And I'd walk for hours sometimes, man. Just hours, and it wouldn't be anything too fast. It wasn't for training. It was just walking and being, and walking and being by myself and thinking and observing and absorbing nature. And it was a game changer for me, man. It really was at that particular time in my life. Yeah.
Yeah. So you talk a lot about reconnecting with your true self, and that's, you know, basically all the bullshit aside, all the shadow, like coming out of the shadows. I actually looked at your website and I saw some of your clients, some of the testimonials that they gave you, and they talked about, you know, one of the athletes that you worked with about reconnecting with herself, or her true self. What does that mean exactly?
Yeah. So, you know, we come into this world and we're almost, you know, pretty innocent, blank slate, and we start absorbing our environment, right? And what happens is we start to make our environment mean something. And that's sort of where we start to separate from our quote unquote true self. And not to say that what we absorb from the environment doesn't contribute to our true self. Of course it does. It's a delicate balance. But it's what we make things mean. That's the issue. Now, sometimes we make things mean something that are in our favor. So we see ourselves in a healthy, positive light. And because of that, we'll be able to set healthy boundaries. We'll say no to something when it doesn't serve us. We'll say yes to something because we believe in ourselves. We have high self-worth and we deserve it. We pursue what interests us. We have a half glass full mentality as opposed to a half glass empty mentality. You know, we start to surround ourselves with people that see us and respect us. And if that changes, we voice that very clearly. You know, we treat people with reverence and respect as we want to be treated. We begin to form very clear ethical, moral, intrapersonal and interpersonal boundaries and understanding of the world. We start to have dreams. That's more of a healthy person. I think if you lined up 100 people and said, you know, would you like that? Would you like to be that type of person? Or would you like to be the type of person that's scared of the world, doesn't take any risks, hides away, is always angry, builds resentment towards others, can't trust people, is closed off sexually, doesn't pursue his or her dreams? Like, where would you go? Which camp would you go? The first, the former, or the latter? Like, I think 99 out of 100 people are going to go to the former unless they have a pathology, right? And so there's that ladder that I described, that people aren't connected to themselves. They've made an experience in their childhood mean something that it doesn't necessarily mean that. So for example, they were crying and crying and crying. And it can be an unconscious or conscious thing. Maybe they're, you know, 1.5, 2 years old, they're crying and mum's not attending to them, or mum's very sporadic and volatile and erratic. And the nervous system makes that mean that I'm unsafe. I'm unsafe in my environment. So no matter what I express and how I express, I'm just not, my needs aren't going to be met. That then, once language starts to get formed and ideas start to get formed, we then start attracting more of that experience to keep ourselves safe. Why? Because if we can preempt it, we're more likely to protect ourselves with greater efficacy. So we'll attract those experiences, create those experiences, look for them. Our attentive neural faculties will look for them, and then we reinforce it. And then the inner dialogue is, see, we're unsafe. And so we take that into adult relationships. And now we're unsafe in our adult relationships. We can't trust people. No matter what we say, it's not enough. We make that mean that we're not enough, and the compound effect starts, right?
Yeah.
Another example, as a kid, maybe you're 8 years old and the teacher said, no, you did that wrong. You have to do it differently. And all of a sudden you got this shock, and your nervous system and your amygdala starts firing, but also your prefrontal cortex starts saying a story that, well, maybe I'm not good enough. And then all of a sudden that story compounds, and now you're not good enough.
Yeah.
Maybe you're bullied. Another example is being bullied, and you start becoming aggressive back. And now whenever anyone questions you or doubts you or attacks you verbally, boom, you're aggressive. That's your coping strategy, right? That's not a healthy way of being. That's not really your true self. It's part of who you are today, but is that who you truly want to be? You really want to live with that undesirable state, those stress hormones being released through your body, you pushing people away, isolating yourself? Does that feel natural to you? I don't think so.
Yeah, no, it sounds a lot like Landmark. How do you break it down? How do you break those stories down and start to get back to that true self?
Yeah, I'm going to go back to what you asked originally and said, what do people do? Seek help. Don't do it on your own. Start looking at your belief systems, but you need someone to reflect back to you, whether you're reading a book, whether it's a workbook or a process that you're taking yourself through. Nothing wrong with doing it on your own, but seek assistance outside of your own frame of reference and reality, because you're conditioned to that reality. We're like this. We don't know that until we're shown that. And so in order to be shown that, we have to expand our awareness and what we're exposed to. So read, do courses online, offline, whatever, virtual, live virtual courses, learn from other people, see a counselor or a therapist, console other people, go see a priest, whatever. It doesn't matter what you believe in. Just go seek perspective outside of your own as a starting point.
Yeah. You talk a lot about masculine energy and the importance of it. I'd love to talk a little bit about that. I actually interviewed Stefan Speaks a while back, and he talks a lot about masculine and feminine energy. And, basically, like, actually, when I was thinking about asking you this question, I was thinking about like toxic masculinity, the difference between toxic masculinity and real or deep masculinity. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. So I'm not a fan of the word or the term toxic masculinity, not because I don't believe in it, because if we have toxic masculinity, we have toxic femininity as well, right? So it's just a toxic expressive state. That's all it is. So what toxic means to me is that it's extreme and it's unsustainable. So it's an extreme version or expression of a particular energetic. So for example, if you're sitting here and I'm sitting here and I'm frustrated, and that frustration turns to anger, and the anger turns to rage, and I sustain that rage. A, that's not sustainable within me because my body can literally not hold that. And B, socially, it's not sustainable either. I'll either end up in jail, or I'm going to hurt people, I'm going to isolate myself. So that's quote unquote toxic behavior, because it's not welcoming, it's not bonding behavior, it's not bringing people closer together, it's not resolving issues, it's just delaying the inevitable, it's numbing, and it's staying stuck in an undesirable state. So I see that as toxic per se. The reason why I'm not a fan of the term is because there's so much dispute and there's so much focus on the actual term. Like, oh, toxic masculinity, you're saying all men are bad. No, I'm not saying that. People that say toxic masculinity, some are saying that all men are bad, and that's not true, because it's just not true.
Right.
And some people are saying, no, that's not what it is, and they're more in alignment with what I'm saying. But then, do you see what happens? People get stuck in the term used instead of actually, what we're actually trying to speak about.
Yeah, the root cause of the issue, because it sounds like the toxic masculinity, regardless of what term you use, the action is probably guys that are living in their shadow.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what it is. It is. It's guys living in their shadow. It's men living in their shadow. So masculinity and femininity as energetics are not exclusively associated with men or women. So masculinity doesn't only reside within men. Another way to put it, and femininity doesn't only reside within women. We live in a dualistic world. So the universe is literally expanding and contracting, right? We live in a physically dualistic world. And so when we express, there's a quote unquote dualism or polarity to that. That doesn't mean that we have to pick one or the other. It just means that we express in both. And the masculine feminine dynamic, it gets a little bit of confusion, and people say, oh, that's cisgender and that's heteronormative and we're going to get away from that. And yeah, it depends on how you look at it, because there is a connection to biology with masculine and feminine, but that's not the whole story.
Right.
It's not the whole story. It's part of it. It's not the whole story. There's culture, there's environment, there's the advent of language, there's the expansion of consciousness. There's all of these things that happen and that have happened that have us expressing a particular way. So another way to look at it is we can look at it as energetics, like doing energy and being energy, going energy, go energy and flow energy, right? As examples. You can look at it as expansion and contraction. You look at it active and passive energy. So we have these energies in us. So for example, if you are highly stressed, and we understand that thoughts can cause physiological stress. Emotions can cause physiological stress. If we're experiencing stress that is chronic, that can lead to sickness.
Right.
And we don't want to die. We don't want to die uncomfortably, right? We have an illusion that we're going to live forever. We're not, but we're scared of our own mortality, but that's another conversation. But we don't want to get cancer, and because that's what it is. We don't want to contract diseases or have diseases and so forth, but excessive stress causes that. Now, being in a more doing energetic, right, of being in a toxic way, in a hyper way, right, in an excessive way. For example, I define myself by doing more in the world. The more productive I am, the more status I have, the more I do in the world, the more I produce in the world, the more money I make, the more hours I work, I'm going to feel better about myself. That's a psychological, emotional complex that we have. That's also a collective complex that we have as a society. And that's an excessive masculine energetic. It's a doing energy. Now, if you're under extreme stress, aligning yourself with that continued path is going to give you more stress. It's not going to be helpful. So you've got to come back. Doesn't mean you don't take action, you don't do. We're doing and being all the time simultaneously almost. Like if I were to sit up right now, it's an action I'm doing, okay? But when you're under extreme stress, maybe the energetic that you need to be a little more in is being energy. In other words, resting, being more passive in your output. Doesn't mean you don't take action and you're not doing, but your energetic shift has changed. Your focus has changed. You can do that as a man or a woman. It's irrelevant.
Are you saying that the being is more of a feminine?
Yeah. It's associated. So being is associated with more of a feminine energetic.
Makes sense.
Passive or a receiving energetic. And the doing, I mean, you look at human anatomy.
Totally.
The woman receives, the man gives,
yeah.
Right? And in male and female. So that's where the association of masculine and feminine comes in, but it doesn't have to be. Women can still give and men can still receive.
Sure.
There's no, in not just in physiological ways, in emotional ways, in human interaction. So yeah, there's the association that doing is more masculine, being is more feminine.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, men will literally work themselves to death. You know, we die of heart attacks. I forget the rate, 10 times more often than women, because we will literally work ourselves to death. And
there's reasons for that.
Yeah. So yeah, we could talk about it, but I think it's an important topic because, the way the world is now, it's like everybody's so afraid to, get into that conversation of look, it's okay for a man to have traditional roles, to open a door for a woman or to be a provider or to, again, I don't want to get myself in trouble, but at the same time, even I'm afraid, finding myself afraid to talk about, to be the head of the household, let's say. I think that there are not even, I know that there are traditional roles, and because things are jacked up, maybe men aren't assuming their roles, that women have taken on some of that masculine energy, and there's men that have taken on feminine energy, and then things start to get twisted. And then you get people, in the media or whatever tell you, well, that was just stuff that was taught to us that that's not, you know, that's not the way it is necessarily. That, you know, a woman could assume this role or a man could assume this role. And I don't think that, you know, naturally that's the way it's supposed to be. I don't know if I'm, you know, explaining myself properly.
Well, there's a few, you made a lot of points there. So let's just break that down a little bit. So the fact that there's a apprehension to speak to this topic, it's saying a lot about where we are, where the pendulum is just swinging in extreme ways. We've had various feminist movements over the years that aren't wrong by any means. It's a reclaiming of power and a cry for and a demand for equity, right? And to be treated in an equitable way. And that, I believe, is very necessary in our world. We as human beings, whether it's race, whether it's culture, whether it's gender, whether it's age, there's way too much discrimination in our world, way too fucking much, right? And that isolation and division, it's causing us as a humanity to suffer greatly. I believe that. Are we born equally? No, we're not. We're not born equally. We're born very differently. The issue is we are scared of difference, right? And history has shown why we're scared of difference, and we continue to be scared of difference. And we need to celebrate difference, right? We need to celebrate who we are. And when you speak about natural roles, we're talking about nature, nurture, right? So natural means that in our biology, physiology, in our genome, we're born this way. Well, yes and no. So it's interesting because when I look at how we are today, I look at not only culturally what has unraveled and how that's unraveled, but I also look at our evolution. How have we evolved? Men have naturally we're born as more physiologically stronger.
Of course.
We're more adept, generally speaking, physiologically. And so in our early years, millions of years ago, we were responsible for extending the perimeter. We were responsible for protecting, or more responsible, should I say. And the female brain and body had a different role. And over millions of years and hundreds of thousands of years, those roles have evolved to be a certain way. Now, the world that we live in is hyper masculine. There's too much masculine energy, and we don't value the feminine energy. Just like our world doesn't really value the elderly. And when we look back at old tribes' traditions, we looked at the elderly were very, very valued. The feminine and females were very valued. We don't live in a world today where that happens. And that's where there's inequity, right? And we're not seeing that the elder people, as an example, carry great wisdom, but we put them in nursing homes. We don't really respect and revere them. We look at how we treat our elderly, right? So we look at how we treat.
I see that with the elderly, but like with women, aren't we further advanced now than we were years ago? Yeah. Because
I believe we are. Yeah. But
I want to say thousands of years ago, women couldn't even, speak in public, or, they didn't have any rights.
In certain cultures, it depends where we're looking at, right? But we're definitely far more advanced than we ever have been. I'm not taking that away. And it's also to a fault. Like, I want to go back to the apprehension about speaking to this. So many men now are in this hyper passive place, which isn't healthy for a man or a woman, where they're scared to talk and they're conforming. And women are coming to him and saying, I don't want a weak man. I don't want a man that is conforming. I want a man that speaks his truth. I want a man that sees me. And so there's this imbalance in energetics it's unraveling for some people, not for everyone, but for some people. And so, you've got to figure out what's really good for you. You can get really truthful. What type of man do you want to be? What type of woman do you want to be? What type of human do you want to be?
Yeah.
Do you want to be, if you're a woman, do you want to be that woman that is slaying it entrepreneurially and, making millions of dollars and breaking necks and cashing checks, and nothing wrong with that, and then comes home and does the same thing at home? If you want to sustain that energy and that feels natural to you, great.
Yeah, but I would even challenge that to say, even if a woman says that she wants that, she doesn't really want that.
The experience that I've got, you're right.
No woman wants to be the man in the relationship. She wants a guy that will stand up and check her. I don't care if she's the CEO of freaking Coca-Cola or whatever. When she comes home, she wants a strong man. And in order to be a strong man, you have to assume that role. And I've seen men not assume that role, and it all sooner or later plays out down the road where that woman doesn't respect them. and then eventually she leaves that man for a stronger man.
In most cases, that generally happens, and it's not that a woman doesn't want to be the man. It's, again, in my experience, the women that have come to me, it's that they don't want to sustain a strong, hyper masculine, energetic way of doing and achieving and goal orientation and completion. There is almost an unnatural aspect to that, where a feminine energetic is more focused on almost the details and the process and the richness of the experience in the moment. Whereas the masculine is more about efficiency and effectiveness. How do I get from point A to point B the most efficient, effective way? That's a masculine energetic, right? And women have that and men have that. We all carry that. But for that to be dominant for most women doesn't feel quite settling. And so we have to have that contrast in our lives where, and that's what relationships do. They help keep us balanced, right? We do create that within ourselves. And that doesn't mean we have a 50-50 masculine, feminine. Authors and teachers such as David Data will say that a man will carry 70% masculine energetic, 30% feminine, and the same is reversed for females. And he believes that. And it's where when we stay true to our core energetic, we naturally have a balance and an expression of both in the way that serves us and serves our relationship. So it's a very complex conversation, but we have to have these conversations without judging ourselves massively, you know, and just starting with, okay, can I get really real with what I want and not just let society dictate to me what needs to be? Because right now society says you need to be successful, you need to do a fucking hell of a lot, you need to work a lot, you need to achieve, you need to climb the corporate ladder, you need to have status, you need to have wealth, you need to have money, you need to have popularity. A lot of these are masculine energetics. Let me explain. Males, from an evolutionary perspective, males gain their self-worth from their contribution and utility in the tribe. How well could they make weapons? How well could they protect? How well could they fight? How well could they hunt? Women, from an attraction dynamics perspective, a lot of their self-worth and their value was gained in their beauty and their aesthetics and their utility, yes, but in a different way. And so in modern culture, we have maybe distorted, maybe it's an extension of that, where men thrive in status, but because they're so dominant in our culture, women feel they need to do that as well. And that's where this disconnect is coming, because it's not completely, quote unquote, natural for a woman to be prioritizing status and relationship. People like Tony Robbins will say that a woman gains a great deal of her purpose and her vision from being an intimate union and relationship, where a man will gain his purpose and vision, or a masculine orientated person, through extension in creating in the world and adding value in the world. And we can understand that because, you know, I mean, women create, man, they give birth, they make babies, so to speak. You know, men don't do that. We don't have that power. That's a superpower. And so our superpower is what we create in the world, right? In the external social setting. And so there are these links here, and most people don't speak to it because it's just an uncomfortable conversation, but it's okay. We can have uncomfortable conversations. It's not the end of the world.
Yeah. So I called the title of this podcast Understanding Men. So you said a lot of your female clients, they want to understand men. Like, what is the typical question or the topic that comes up over and over with females trying to understand men? I know there's going to be a lot of women that watch this.
Yeah, of course. What are some of the big questions that women ask?
Because I feel like men are I don't feel like it's hard to understand us personally. I mean, because for the most part, men are pretty straightforward. Like, we usually say what we mean. The women, on the other hand, we
do communicate a little differently.
They'll interpret what we say to mean whatever they want us to mean.
That's a human.
Sometimes I see that.
We all do that. No, we do process information a little differently. You know, our hormonal profiling is different. Our biology is different. Our brains are a little different, not massively different, but a little different, you know. So there's differences in the ways that we process and articulate information. But to answer your question, women really want to understand what men are thinking and how they think. And really what they want, and what we all want, is to relate to each other. And generally we want to relate to each other in the most familiar way. And so we'll communicate to other people the way we want to be communicated to. So it's very common for that, what you just said, that comment of, oh, I think it's easy to understand men. It is, because most men are very familiar to you. And you'll also, as an individual, you'll surround yourself with people that are familiar to you because it feels safe. So, and it feels comfortable, and there's a connection there, and there's a resonance, a relatability. And so we want familiarity. And what women don't understand is they don't understand how they're not seen. They don't understand how they're not appreciated. They don't understand how they're not maybe loved, and why men can't see that. And men have very similar things, man. Why aren't I respected? Why aren't I appreciated? Why can't she see the value that I bring? But you know, what women really want is reliability. They want consistency. Then in research, this is research, and this isn't just me mouthing off anecdotally. Not that there's anything wrong with that. That's fine too. But thousands and thousands of qualitative and quantitative research methodology has demonstrated that women desire reliability, integrity, trustworthiness. They want consistency in behavior from men, you know? And so they're seeking that, and they're asking why does a man say he's going to call but he doesn't? Why does a man say he's going to do something but he doesn't? Why does a man not give me the attention that I need? Why is he always working? Or why is he always with guys? Or why is his energies elsewhere and not here? So women really want to understand that. And that's a big thing to unpack. But essentially is what's happening is men are attempting to derive self-worth in the best way they know how. And for them, it's not necessarily just sitting there with their partner and listening. Sometimes it is, but for some men that's really difficult because, again, culturally, we're not conditioned to learn how to emote and be with emotions. So that's very challenging for us. So it's easier for us to go out and work and bring money in or do something or create something because we like to be with our hands. We've evolved that way, building things with our hands. And we think, oh, she's going to love this. She's going to be really appreciative of this. And then she's happy and appreciative, but not really. And it's like, oh, she doesn't love me. And when the men make that mean that, but it's just we're talking different languages. Yeah. So we have to come into that understanding. That's going to be very helpful for us.
What percentage of men do you think have intimacy issues? Do you think it's most men? The reason I ask is
I'm going to say yes.
My therapist told me that I have an avoidant attachment style.
Yeah.
Recently. And I don't know what that means. He gave me a book, told me a book I need to read. Basically, he's like, do you pull people in and then push them away? And I said, all the time. And he said, you have an avoidant attachment style. And it's something to do with, intimacy. Cause I can feel that. Like I only let people get
were your mom and dad together?
No, I mean, till 10 months old.
10 months old. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did your mom have you stayed with your mom most of the time, right?
Yeah.
Did your mom have boyfriends?
Several.
Yeah, I thought so. Okay, so you would have witnessed, and so several, just your mum cycling through, right?
Yeah, I mean, she wasn't,
to some degree.
She had, she
noticeably though. Several.
I live with her and a few different of her boyfriends.
Yeah. Okay. So that's more than enough, right? And did you witness them arguing a lot at all? Conflict?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's very common for you to say, I'm not going to deal with emotion because that's just going to be conflict. Conflict's uncomfortable. I saw that in my mum. Fuck that. I'm going to avoid. So anything that gets emotionally uncomfortable, anything that's challenging in that way, I have no doubt that if you and I are walking down the street and some guys attack us, you're ready to roll. I have no doubt about that. Right? I can see that. I trust you. But if it comes down to emotional stuff, you're like, see you later. I'm out. And so you're literally out. You're getting in the car and you're driving away. You're breaking up with a person. That's why you're on off. You were on off with people. You have an avoidant attachment style, and that also. But I mean, attachment styles essentially, brother, really they're developed in our formative years. Up to the first stage is up to 6 months old, and then up to 6 months to 2 years, and then sort of 2 years to 3 years. Like that's where attachments really formed in terms of attachment style. But that would have all been reinforced what you witnessed as a young kid up to the age of 15 or whatever. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Wow. It's crazy. It's crazy that you could be walking around. Like I didn't even know this stuff up until, and I did a lot of life coaching, but it wasn't until I did Landmark that I really started to figure some of this stuff out.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, man, life coaching and it's, you 6 weeks and you got a certificate. It's like, Well,
life coaching, I think they say is about your future. Therapy is about your past. And I never really turned around to look at things from my past because I was just more worried about the vision and where I'm going.
Yeah. You only get so far.
Yeah.
You only get so far.
Absolutely.
I mean, internally and externally, like you can get, because it's an easy argument to that. And I think about this stuff all the time. Well, what about those billionaires that they're pretty wounded? but they have been, you know, they've got really far. They're successful, quote unquote, in reference to metrics in society. Yeah, but how happy are they? And why? What's driving their pursuit? And how deeply content are they? And grateful are they? You know, so there's, and we don't know that answer. You've got to talk to them, and they've got to be honest, and you've got to break that down. But my point is, you'll only get so far without dealing with your past. And also at the same time, man, it's not, here's the thing. We want social, everything's parallels, right? We want social change. People go, oh, you know, change. Black Lives Matters, you know, police brutality, all these things we want to change. And so what happens? People rally. That's called grassroots. Now, shit ain't going to change in a society that is governed by government. So we need a top-down approach. That's government, policy, leadership, and a grassroots uprising at the same time. It's the same thing with intrapersonal development. We need to vision the future. We need to get real in the present, and we've got to deal with our past. It's not one or the other. It's not, oh, therapy is better because it deals with the past. Not at all. You need it. You need all of it. It's just how you listen. And I use all of it in when I'm coaching and training people, helping people, serving people.
Yeah. So tell me about that. What do you got? What are you working on? Do you have a seminar, workshop? Because I'm sure there's going to be people out there that might be interested in connecting with you on a deeper level.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate it. So I have a one-on-one practice. I have pod coaching where I work with 2 to 4 people, and that's a more affordable option. And that's really powerful too. It just depends what you are sort of interested in. My wife and I have a couple of workshops coming up. So in August, we have an inner child workshop level 1, inner child workshop level 2 in October. First one was a great hit. We had 300 people sign up. It was amazing. And did that 2.5-day virtual live event, really powerful. And then we record it so if people can't make it, they can go over it. We have an event in Austin at the end of September. It's a live event, 4.5 days, breath work, relationships, masculine, feminine dynamics, contrast dynamics, sexuality. It's going to be great. Love, you know, love for self, love in relationships, and love for a higher source. So that's going to be really powerful. And that's really what I've got going on at the moment. I've got men's programs, but at the moment, there's nothing at this stage for the rest of the year for that.
Yeah. Where can people find you at? Is it your website? Is that the best place?
Yeah, well, the easiest place actually is growwithstef.com, S-T-E-F. So growwithstef.com, and that will take you to my main website. There's a heap of freebies there. You can do a love assessment. What's blocking you from love? Take this assessment and you're going to start figuring it out. Do you have a fear of commitment? Do you have a fear of intimacy? Do you have a fear of loss? There's all these different fears that we have that govern us and hold us back from really experiencing love. So there's a free assessment there, and you can apply for coaching. There's a heap of information there as well.
That's awesome, man. I mean, honestly, if somebody would have told me about this stuff just a few years ago, I would have been like, I would have thought it was BS. I mean, even as you're talking about breath work and inner child, and I'm like, even after our conversation and knowing you just basically read my mail, you know, I'm like, it's still like, there's still a little cynicism, you know, to me. And I'm like, but I know that there's truth in it, man. And I'm excited just to, you know, look at the rock and see all the ugly stuff under there and really try to figure myself out.
I admire your courage, man. That's not an easy thing to do. And you're at that place where you're really doing it. I mean, I think that never ends, to be honest with you, bro. I do that all the time. 2 days ago, I was unpacking deep shame within me. I felt like I was paralyzed, you know, like I'm not perfect. Literally 2 days ago. So we were always going to be unpacking stuff. That's how but it's our willingness to go into that really frees us. And that's the most powerful thing we can take away from any of this conversation is willingness to go deep into that stuff.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, man. It was definitely a pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, likewise, man. Thank you so much.
And if people want to find you on Instagram, it's is it Stef Stefandos or it's Stefanos?
Stefanos at Stefanos Stefandos. Yeah, should change that to like relational alchemist or something. Make it easier for people.
Yeah, it would be easier. I'll put the link when I post this episode. So hey, I appreciate you coming on, Stefanos.
Thanks, brother.
Have a great rest of your day. See ya.